You know, I've often said there are two kinds of riders. There's those who can or could ride a motorcycle, and then there are those who shouldn't. And in this video, I kind of want to talk about what I think differentiates riders that can or could and those that shouldn't. You know, I'm going to be real honest about this, about what I think. But by the same token, I am no expert. I'm just an old guy from Tennessee. I've said that a million times. But these are things that I've kind of noticed over 50 years of riding. You know, whether they're true or not, I don't know. But it's something that I place a little higher on the safety list. For as long as there have been motorcycles on the road, there have been motorcycle crashes. And for all that time, there have been studies and reports put out detailing what happens in these crashes, what causes them, and what can be done to improve the rider's safety. And in all of those reports and studies that have been done for probably half a century or more, there's a unanimous consensus that the number one safety item a motorcyclist should have when they're riding to prevent injury or death is an approved motorcycle helmet. I would say that there is one more item that I would put even higher above safety gear, and that is the correct mindset when you ride a motorcycle. Riding is different than driving, and you know, there's plenty of reasons for that. You know, when you're on a motorcycle, the experience is more visceral. We're more engaged by our elements around us than we are when we're in a car. When we're in a car, you know, we're looking at dashes, and you know, some people are texting, talking to other people in the car. You know, you're in an air-conditioned environment or heated, versus the opposite with motorcycles. You're just not experiencing the same thing, and so maybe it's just that the brain is not as engaged when you're in a car as it is when you're on a bike. But for sure, riding is different than driving. And what I have experienced, and I'm going to give you an example. There was a guy I used to ride motorcycles with, and we rode for a couple years together. We did a lot of riding, you know, thousands of miles, mostly local. But I began to notice something with this rider that, you know, caused me to rethink how I approach riding with other riders. And, you know, I've done a video where I talk about I prefer to ride alone, and I do. But, you know, I would ride with other people, and I still have. But I'm more picky about who I ride with, and I'll get into that. But this one rider, on one occasion, we were going to a restaurant that was about 4 miles away. We had been there before. We had taken the exact route that we were going to take. And when we talked about it, I said, why don't you go ahead and lead, you know, and I'll follow you down there. No. You know, they always wanted me to be in the lead. That was red flag number one. But, you know, when we talked about this, you know, we talked about the route we were going to take, and, you know, we immediately set out. And when we got to this, there was one spot where we were going to turn right onto a 2-lane road to about, you know, 1/8 of a mile, and then we had to turn left. And we had talked about this just 5 minutes before. And so we get to this point, and we pull out, and no one is coming from the left or from the right. As we pull out, I look, and this rider is behind me, but trailing way back. Within 5 seconds, I'm at the 50% mark. You know, I put my blinker on. We're going to turn left here in just a minute. And as I look in the mirror, the first thing I see is he's closing distance. And I'm like, okay, he's catching up. And I look behind him. There's no one behind him. There's no one in front of us. And there's no one at that intersection where we're going to turn in. So I kind of focus back on him. And as I'm watching in the mirror, his speed is not decreasing. He's actually increasing speed. And so as I stayed in the left portion of my lane, I watched as he drove past me at about 45 miles an hour. And as he went past, he looks at me like he had no idea of what was going on. And that was the first instance of this happening. And it happened 3 times, probably within the space of about 3 or 4 months. But I think motorcycling does use, and years ago we were taught that, humans have two halves of our brain and we use one side more predominantly than others. And that was well accepted up until about 20 or 30 years ago. And then they just said, nope, nope, nope. All humans use all of their brain all the time. And that other thing is a myth. Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. If there's anybody out there that's in a position that could speak authoritatively on this, please drop a comment down there and let me know, because, if people at Harvard say that that's a myth, then I'll believe that. But I'm not so sure. Maybe all people can use all sides of their brain, but maybe they just choose not to when they're doing certain tasks. Whatever it is, I believe that when you're on a motorcycle, you probably should be using both sides because it's not a routine experience. Even a road that you've been on a million times is not a routine experience. It shouldn't be allocated to just that one side of your brain that is going, okay, we've done this before, go here, do this, do that. I think it's the other side of the brain that says, hey, wait a minute, look at this. And I've got a thing, and I'm going to put this up here on the screen. But this is from Harvard University. And this was a report I pulled up. This is from 2023. They said, those who are right-brained are supposed to be intuitive and creative free thinkers. They are qualitative, big picture thinkers who experience the world in terms that are descriptive or subjective. For example, the skies are gray and menacing. I wonder if it's going to rain. They go on to say, meanwhile, left-brained people tend to be more quantitative and analytical. They pay attention to details and are ruled by logic. Their view of the weather is more likely, the weather forecast said there was only a 30% chance of rain, but those cumulonimbus clouds will probably bring thunder as well as rain. And it goes on to say, a popular book, first published in 1979, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, extends this concept. It suggests that regardless of how your brain is wired, getting in touch with your right brain will help you see and draw things differently. So that's pretty interesting. So again, I don't know if any of it's true or not, but I see things when I'm writing that make me believe that there definitely is people who access more of their brain in anticipation of events. And I think that is the motorcycle mindset. You have to be able to anticipate what other drivers are going to do. You're not taking responsibility for their mess ups, but you need to. I mean, you need to anticipate when someone is going to do something. And I would even go so far as to say that, when you see something happen, you need to remember that and then go back and think about that and ask yourself, was there something that could have, tipped me off that was coming? And I think, you can gain valuable experience that way by kind of looking at drivers and watching what they do in certain circumstances. When I was thinking about the idea for this video, I sat down and I was going to write out a script, or at least some bullet points that I could talk about. And when I sat down, I found that there was really nothing that I could, sum up in a few words, because there was so much to talk about. But at the same time, there is really nothing you can put down on paper and say, yep, that's the motorcycling mindset. So I kind of fell back on something that my dad told me many years ago when I was growing up. And he was speaking basically about bicycles and cars and things mechanical as I was growing up, because he knew that I was going to, eventually at the rate I was going, I was going to hurt myself somehow. But he told me two things. One is you never stop learning, ever. And he says when you do, that's when you fall behind. And the other thing he told me was that, when it comes to mechanical machines and things of that nature, he said, just when you think you have them figured out, that's when they'll come back and bite you in the ass. It's really a mentality that is unlike our physical skills in riding. You can definitely go to riding schools and you can hone your techniques in the physical sense. But when it comes to the mental sense, we must accept that we're never honed. We're never there. We're never experts. We never have everything figured out. And that probably for me sums it up well. Hey guys, I want to thank all of y'all for watching and subscribing, and for all of your comments. I'm reading every single one. I really appreciate it. Keep it up, and I'll keep it up on this end, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Take care.